I'm gonna step outside, hopefully
Just
make
all
fake cat
blur.
noises.
Okay. All right, man.
Thank you a lot, Rafi.
Good seeing you. Thank you, Rob. Hello, hello, hello.
Oh,
Doop, doop. Hello, hello, hello. Hello.
Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. All right, so that's good to go. It's time to mute it.
But the fun's just begun. Welcome to the August 28th, 2024 meeting of the Board of Architectural Review Large. My name is Jay White. I'm acting chairman. And other board members present this afternoon are Eddie Bello, far in there, Seton Brown, James Metters, and Trey Watkins, who we welcome to the board for his first time. He is the attorney member of the board. You may know that John Robinson resigned from the board, but we are happy that Trey is here. And
Thank you.
you're gonna
Enjoy the ride.
you might regret this. City staff present tonight are B.D. Wortham Galvin, city architect, Lawrence Courtney, Travis Galley, Brad Thomas, all staff with the city Department of Planning, Preservation, and Sustainability. Applicants have been required to submit any documents you see tonight in advance of the meeting. Staff can control the slide presentation. There may be a clicker that may be functional on the, we make that joke every meeting. There's a clicker up there if you want to advance yourself. Anything that you see is in accordance with submittal requirements, and applicants can ask staff to advance the slide if they don't want to do this themselves. It is rather laborsome to do that yourself. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their names while speaking, just for clarity of record. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the City of Charleston's public meeting channel on YouTube, where it will forever be here. So take that into account. Your appearance here is your consent to the board. The order of the meeting will be as follows. There'll be an introduction and overview of the project by city staff, for the board, and for the public. And then applicant presentation. This is a 10-minute time limit. You can request more time from the chair, but considering that we have tapered down to one meeting a month and we have larger agendas, and we once did really implore applicants to stick to that 10 minutes for the sake of brevity and concision, it may actually help you in your approvals. Any and all presenters should clearly state their name for the record. Any persons affiliated with the project, whether you're an owner, developer, designer, consultant, whatever, please speak during this point rather than during public comment. This will be followed by a period of public comment. Any written public comments we received have already been distributed to the board in advance of the meeting, and will be read into the record only as requested by a member of the board and with permission of the chair. Any of the member that wishes to be heard in person on the agenda item is requested to state their name and address for the record, and be reminded there's a two-minute time limit for these remarks unless I extend it, which I probably won't. Applicant does not respond to comments during this section of the meeting. This will be followed by city staff comments and a recommendation, and then there will be a brief period of time where the applicant can respond or clarify to the public comments or city staff comments. That's about 5 minutes or less. This will be followed by a board discussion and a vote. The applicant does have an opportunity to clarify any inaccurate information that's being discussed during this period if you ask me to recognize you. Raise a hand and be a little patient. Board members will be polled by me for comments and for a vote on the motion. I'll reread the motion verbatim, and if I misstate it, please correct me for clarity of record. Once a motion is in proper order and seconded, each member when voting shall respond yea in favor or nay, not in favor. The results will be posted on the city website. We have one item that was withdrawn, item B1, 19 St. Margaret Street. And then we give the public comment, which actually the public comment is on the city website, is it not?
It is.
Okay. And as a reminder, please turn off all noisy devices, unless it's your pacemaker. And please limit your comments to architecture only. We really have no purview over most issues of zoning, such as noise, traffic, density, or property use. We are here to discuss architectural effects generally. Okay, with that.
Yep.
Shall we?
Yep.
All right, first item is A1, approval of minutes from the July 24th, 2024 meeting. Okay, we have a motion to approve.
Second.
Second provided. All in favor, say aye.
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 Got it. Well, it passes unanimously. And now I'm going to step out recused for item B2.
And just to clarify for the room, James Matters will be taking the role of chair during this application. You need the chairman sheet for you.
Item number two is 74 President Street.
Correct. Okay. So agenda item 274 President Street, new construction not rated in the Old City District. And they are requesting final approval of mock-up for new MUSC College of Health Professions building. And just to remind all of the location of this project. We're ready for applicant presentation.
Good afternoon, I'm Margie Longshore with SMHA. We're the architect for the project. I have with me our contractor representative, John Bidler with Rogers Thompson Turner, and John Miller, who's the owner's representative of Brownstone Construction Group. We'd be happy to answer any questions. First slide we have is the mock-up panel location, so that anyone that's able to go by and take a look can find it, but showing the project location just south of the corner of B and President Street downtown. And then we have a couple of photos of the completed mock-up panel. And I do have boards showing the full elevations if there are any questions about where the materials occur, where details occur on the building that I'm happy to pull out. But the south side of the mock-up panel shows the stucco finish at the bottom, transitioning to ACM, the brick finish that will occur on floors 2 through 5 of the building, and then the ACM panels that will occur at floor 6 on the building. And then the east side of the panel, again, shows the stucco that is the first floor material on the building, curtain wall that spans on a couple of sides of the building from the 2nd floor up through the 6th floor. And then the setback metal panels occur at the penthouse level, the 7th floor of the building, and typically are set back from the primary building facades. And then we have sections of the mock-up panel and elevations as well. And that may be the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Margie. Thank you. Well, I mean, does anybody have any questions for Margie?
And then public.
Public comment. I didn't anticipate that there would be.
I know, but you know, we just protocol just in case.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, yeah. Sealant colors have been discussed extensively, and the applicant is willing to continue to work with staff until an acceptable generalized brick and mortar blended color is found, which may be used almost everywhere for elements in and on the brick wall. While the addition of the metal panel system below the storefront system is not quite as it will be on the building, staff is persuaded that it will in fact be an easier condition to deal with on the building and is therefore acceptable. A more appropriate flood vent color closer to the stucco base color is being explored. These occur behind the historic wall and are minimally visible. And due to the length of the vertical fins at the storefront, applicant and contractor are recommending either exposed fasteners at intervals to match the storefront or the application of an extra trim piece to conceal them. Staff prefers painting of these small, distant, and minimally visible fastener heads with a high-performance exterior paint to help avoid maintenance issues in the future. Conditions for approval, applicant and contractor are to continue to work with staff on all above items, and staff recommendation is for approval with board and staff conditions.
Are there any comments from the board? Margie informed me this morning when I was meeting with John and Margie that nobody had come to the review of the mock-up that was scheduled. Nor did I, but I went by and looked at it today, and we had a good meeting. And I want to make a few comments, which I've shared already with Lawrence and BD. Overall, I think the mock-up was successful. She did a great job on it. It's not clear how the head flashing is going to work above the windows because it stops just short of the end, and don't know if that will make an exterior visible change that would be noticeable or not, but we discussed that on site. All of the cuts on the metal that are part of the window assembly revealed exposed aluminum and no coating on it. And I think that that in our toxic environment could lead to problems in the future. And I encourage you to take a look at how maybe the ends of all of those cuts or miters could be coated. You know, and the exposed fasteners are tough. The ones that I saw were coated. I don't know what they're coated with, but they were coated. As we discussed this morning, I think it's difficult when you have exposed fasteners, simply because that's where your wear and tear happens. And maybe as they loosen up over time, water gets in. And so it's just do the best that you can do with that. It is high, and I doubt anybody will see them. But those were my comments. And I apologize for getting off of protocol. I had been thinking about this and just assuming that nobody would have many comments. So so with that, is there any additional board discussion?
Minor, I couldn't go by the official meeting, but I went by this afternoon. I agree with everything you said and what city architect said. I did notice that the actual window joints, besides them being cut, they seemed a little bit sloppy. I think part of that's just the scale of the window being so small, you really notice, but they weren't all plumb and square. Just want to make a comment about that. I don't expect that they would have that for all the windows. I just wasn't as well done as it could be. Just want to make that comment. Not enough to hold anybody out though.
Anyone else?
No further comments from me.
Is there a motion?
I don't know if I can repeat everything you said, James.
Or just board comment?
Okay, so I move for approval with board and staff.
Eddie has moved for approval with board and staff comments. Is there a second? Seaton is seconded. Eddie, how do you vote?
Yeah, in favor.
Seaton,
Yay in favor.
Trey,
Yay in favor.
and I also vote yea in favor. Passes. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty.
For Jay to come back in.
I have to read this.
I mean, I could technically go, but.
Sorry.
Then after that, it's pretty smooth sailing.
Yeah.
We'll stay in
That's
it.
right, yeah.
Coming in that. Agenda item number 3 is 860 Morrison Drive, which is new construction in the historic corridor district, and they are requesting a preliminary approval of a 250 10-story hotel. And just to remind everybody, this is a location of project. We're ready for applicant presentation.
All right,
Yep.
got a couple of show and tell that, you guys. All of the administration, along with that. Representative. Good afternoon, my name is Will Taylor, I'm an architect with TBS Design in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm joined by several of my colleagues here today, some representatives from the side, as well as one side, yellow. We've got quite a few slides, but we're going to go through some of these and spend more time focusing on things that are specific to what came out of the staff comments previous meeting. Others will kind of expeditiously move through if that's okay. I think I'm going to take a run at using the clicker. Is that all right?
Got to be.
Good. A couple things here. I'm not going to dwell on that, nor I'm going to read this, but again, we want to really focus on a couple things. Specifically, the first item is, what you see in the model there. We'll also see more details of that, and that's more defined fenestration, more details. And you'll see that pretty clearly in the comparing and contrasting between the previous renderings that we used last time and where we are today. And we'll talk more about the details and things that make up that composition. And secondly is a little bit more detail on the connecting areas, specifically in the parking lot that connect from the arrival of the hotel courtyard and arrival plaza to through the parking lot and potentially to a future. Again, site related locations, neighborhood buildings and context. That's the previous concept. This image here, illustrative site plan, will focus a little bit on, particularly the parking lot that you see in the lower right here. We created some pathways, some dedicated pathways, kind of a lane, if you will, that provides kind of a finish at the lane, which should be brick pavers, the continuity or continuation of that which you see in the arrival plaza, along with some tabby concrete things that become more definitively directional and unifying as they pull from the arrival courtyard to potentially a future pathway along the water's edge. You're seeing that a little bit more clearly here. We'll talk more about materials and you'll see some of those later on in the presentation. Not going to dwell on floor plans, nothing of significant change here that we haven't already addressed. So we'll click through those fairly quickly. Sorry, here we get up through the building, typical floors. Again, these are before and after, so you're seeing a lot of kind of what we had previously presented, what we have now. No dramatic changes, just more development as you see in the plans. All right, an aerial view just sitting within the context of Morrison Drive, the massing of the building. We'll see more specifically as we zoom in on the facade where we're beginning to create more articulation and definition within the facades. You're starting to see some slight color shifts where we're looking at GFRC materials that have more of a warmer tone, less of a white bright tone. So I think we're starting to blend those and find some unification in that color palette. You'll see that again as we move through some of these. I think this is a good example. The image on the top is what we presented for early phase last time we were here. The image you see on the bottom is where we are today. Specifically, as you begin to look at the fenestration on that facade, it's pretty clear you see not only a color shift in the material palette, but I think the way the fenestration begins to work, you're seeing less of a pattern of windows that feels more square-like, but things that begin to create more of a rhythm and a vertical orientation on the building. So again, it's a big building, but the idea is to begin to break that down in scale and look at how beautifying those elements are. And we'll see some more details in a minute, specifically on the balcony edges. There were some comments on that previously about how they felt a little heavy. So as we move through this, you'll begin to see this is where we are now. So this is a zoomed in version. This is the north facade. So as you look at this, you see the major components within the building. You're seeing the articulation of the frames. The lighter color is the GFRC. Inset within that is the window and glazing. The glazing quantities are the same as what we had before. So there's no change in the glazing. We haven't reduced glazing. We've kept the same amount of glazing. You're seeing more details and refinement on the interstitial or in between those frames. So you're getting some nice dimensional depth in the building. You're getting nice shadow plays. The gray band in the middle that you see is more of the ACM or composite metal panel. You're seeing the GFRC on the kind of the leading edge or the western edge of the building with its articulation beginning to kind of articulate that with some reveals of joints that start to break down the scale of the mass. And at the top of the image, you're beginning to see some of the more granular detail, which is more of the box rib panels. So you're seeing some joint patterns that start to convey kind of the openness and the lightness of that material. Corresponding elevations, top is what we previously presented. What we see on the bottom now is where we are today. And then as we get into this, we're starting to look at components, or what we call components. You're starting to take pieces of the building and really study that from an architectural character, image, details, how those work both in section, elevation, as well as axonometric. And then zooming in yet again, you're starting to see how all those pieces come together. So this is evolving. You're starting to see more refinement, not only in the facade and the fenestration, but the way we begin to resolve these as a system. Again, we're just moving around, looking at different parts of the building that are unique, things that are, that we need to begin to develop. Certainly looking at the top or parapet of the building where you're transitioning, looking at glass rails, things that kind of lighten the top of the building and not create a heavy expression. More of an elevated bird's eye view, if you will, over the connector. Looking back at the fenestration on that north facade. Again, more of an eye level view, maybe an in-town approach view from Mount Pleasant. Again, the top is what we previously presented. The bottom, you start to really register some of the articulation and the depth in the facade, the shadow play on the building, and things like that. Accentuate that scale and mass. And get more components, really taking a deep dive on some of these. This is the southbound view on Morrison. Top view is where we were previously. The bottom view is where we are today. So again, I think some really nice refinement in this, really getting the details starting to pop in this building and having that shadow play and that depth in the system really, I think is starting to help break down some of those different facades. Corresponding elevations, again, more details, some views kind of looking down that arrival, entry into the development site. And through to the water again, always have been important, and so maintaining those as vistas and view corridors. Along Morrison, not a lot of change here, really, again, just responding to transitioning down to the street. We've got flood zones and other requirements that that are making us elevate the building. I know we've had conversations, Limwa and things like that are elevating the building. So finding graceful and subtle ways to transition the building down. More details corresponding to that. A couple other views that begin to show again the before and after fenestration. Let's see, we'll click through these. We've got canopy details, other things you're starting to see in that model. Aerial views, again, just taking what we've shown before, beginning to show kind of an evolution to that. Parking and plaza and arrival, looking at landscape solutions, hardscape solutions, how to begin to integrate terraces and other parking elements within the arrival plaza. Some details corresponding to that. More technical drawings on landscape and materials and finish. We can see the white side folks. More details, more technical drawings. This is more of the material palette. So again, you're starting to see some of the hardscape finishes. You're starting to see some of the landscape finishes that are carried through the project. Lighting. We're all well aware of the sensitivity of lighting in projects in this context. So being sensitive to that is of paramount importance, but also making sure that we meet minimum code requirements, which is something we have to be obligated to do. So, but doing that in a sensitive way. So what we started to show here and see it in the plan diagram in green is where you're starting to see potential for lighting elements around the landscape, really allowing the landscape to be a dominant element, something that you see as part of that experience as you arrive. The magenta color or red color, you see kind of tracking around the south side and emerging on the west side of Morrison Drive would be made more representative of indirect lighting. So I think what we want to try to avoid, you want to maintain the code requirements for lighting, but I think you want to do that in a very sensitive way. Something that doesn't feel like you're looking at direct fixtures, something that feels like it's more of a subtle illumination on the building and not something harsh and dominating on the building. The blue that you see here in these areas where you've got transitions up, see an image on the second to the right on the bottom. I think really getting some stair lighting, something subtle that meets the code requirements for foot candles, but also something that's not overpowering. So I think these are things that we're looking at, we're sensitive to, we understand that that's something that within this context we have to be well aware of. So again, materials, and you're seeing some of those that we passed around. We've got photos of materials on the building, metal panel colors in the upper left. Directly below that is a GFRC. You're seeing paving patterns that would be in the entry plaza, tabby concretes, architectural finishes on the concrete. Those are photos. The examples of photos on the right are representative of some of the materials we're looking at on the project. I believe that was it, right? So I didn't check my watch. Okay.
9 minutes.
9
minutes. Congratulations.
Might be a first.
Yes, sir. Any questions from the board? Yeah.
So the previous application had the adjacent building with and this one does not. Correct. What's the story with that?
It's a separate, and it's my first staff comment. It's separate. It'll come through preliminary on its own track.
And I read that, but is do you anticipate that changes completely in its application?
It's gone through and it's been approved for Hikesdale and Mass. Of course, is that right?
That's right. So I mean, you don't anticipate starting over.
We do not anticipate starting to.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions to the board?
You mentioned the lighting package being in the context of safety. Is it fall in line with the lighting requirements of the city of Charleston?
The light as far as a code requirements,
Is it part of the BAR standards?
BAR standards. Yes, we have actually, I think you might be able to speak a little bit more clearly to that as far as the standards on that.
Sure. I'll start. Yeah. All right, in terms of lighting, like, I know that at least BAR policy statement, uplighting, downlighting, those are clearly stated in the policy. What we're looking for is more of a backdrop to the site and landscape features. Does that answer it, Steve?
No. So I see an example of uplighting in the package. I believe that's against BAR standards.
Not of landscape.
Okay,
Okay, yeah,
thank you.
on that one, the palm tree.
Mhm.
Yeah. We were gonna say uplighting today. That's, yes, it's certainly not on the building.
Okay, any other questions? If not, public comment regarding this application. If not that, then city staff comments and recommendation.
So as I previously mentioned, the mixed-use office building is not part of the scope of this preliminary review. That will come through with its own separate package and will be reviewed in a future submittal. Applicant has met previous board and staff conditions by continuing to refine the public walkway hardscape and landscape details in and around the surface parking area. The public walkway materials have been differentiated from the parking area and drive aisles, but are like the materiality of the shared street area, emphasizing the public nature of the path and the continuity from Morrison Drive. Terrace planters have been added on either side of the public path, which help to screen the parking area and provide a threshold to both the public path and the public access to the terrace area above. Applicant has met previous board and staff conditions by continuing to refine the composition and materials of the north and south facades of the hotel tower as requested. Applicant has improved the vertical reading of the elevation through emphasizing a vertical composition of the window wall system and primary frame. The guest balconies framing also provides verticality through the material choices. These refinements in composition and material choices have improved the perception of the elevations. We have no staff conditions for approval, and we recommend preliminary approval with board conditions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Got a text from my wife, got to answer that. All right, any applicant response to that? I imagine there might not be.
I might have a couple of things to say. We had an extra minute. Well, I think one, just to Eddie Bello with Bello, just to emphasize on the lighting, it's early, but the intent is to follow the BAR policy. We do not want to light up the building. We just need to have some lighting at the ground plane for circulation. So just to be clear, and it's early, we've got to figure that out, but we do not want to light up the building. I want to make sure that's clear. I think we agree with everything you said. What I wanted to stress was a lot of work has been done, as is the case after a conceptual to preliminary on a project of this size, a lot of development happened. We have gone through a lot with our contractors to ensure that we're on track for pricing, which is a big deal. But I think the key takeaway, and I'm glad that he picked up on it, is as we've developed it, the building's gotten much better. It's much more refined. It's a lot lighter. It's a big building, but it's a lot more elegant. It's got more depth. So I just want to kind of reinforce that it's not that we've just done more work. We've actually strengthened. Also, I did want to throw out, and we feel like we've met all of the conditions that were asked for us last time. Mr. Meadows, that's what I'm going to say. Unless there's something you need to see next time, hopefully everything's okay. We would love to have details to staff. Just throwing that out. Thank you. I have to say that.
You're such an entertaining presenter. All right, board discussion.
Yes, sir. So I have less to say than I have in previous meetings. I appreciate the current updates, and you can see, I can feel the modifications that have been made after studying the plans, and I think that they're They're great. And I'd like to ask you what you think the most significant change is that you made from conceptual to now.
I don't mind
They did
answering.
all the hard work.
I really think, let me step back up to the.
Yeah, please, just so they
Yeah,
can be heard.
I really think it was, in the facade, it was interesting, we all felt really good about where we were at the end of concept, the conceptual phase. But it's great to see that before and after the two that we saw, particularly on the north facade, because there's a lot of scrutiny on that. We had conversations about that in previous meetings. But just to see, I think that, again, reading those materials, reading that detail, that more granular detail, I think is what really, to me, I mean, it feels like it's come a long way, and I know we all felt good about where we were last time. But I feel like we made really good steps to kind of further that and get more detail in there, get more, and maybe create more visual depth in the building. So I think, to me, I feel like where we've made the greatest leaps.
I agree.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Yep.
I will say that this application has progressed well and they've responded to previous comments, and I'm comfortable with staff's recommendation and also a final review by staff. Any other board comments?
Nothing from me.
Oh, no, you have to say something.
Don't hate him.
Oh, he's tougher than he looks. And he looks pretty tough. Any motion from the board?
I'll be glad to make a motion for preliminary approval.
Okay, any conditions on that? Usually we'll say with board and staff comments or so forth.
I don't believe there were any staff comments and I haven't heard.
No,
any
well, there
board
weren't
comments,
any
so.
conditions. Well, you are an attorney. And then also the other thing that they've requested is if the final review stage can occur at the staff level.
And staff is fine with that. We wanted to leave the decision to the board.
Okay,
Right, so I'll modify the motion for preliminary approval with the
Final review by staff.
final review by staff.
FRBS, as it gets noted sometimes. All right, so we have a motion made for preliminary approval with final review by staff. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, we'll go down the roll. Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
No, not in favor.
You're not in favor. Mr. Metters, how do you vote? Mr. Watkins,
Yeah, in favor.
and I vote likewise. The motion carries 3-1.
Thank you.
Sorry, I got
Service with my daughters. It's usually. Yes. we're like, you know, like-
I'm trying to remember.
So that way, there's some emergency.
Okay, next application, number 4, 642 King Street.
642 King Street is new construction in the Oldham Historic District, and they're requesting preliminary approval of the new site plan. And this slide is just orienting towards the location on King Street. And then we are ready for the presentation, Mr. Kraft.
Yes.
Kenny Kraft with Kraft Design Studio. Been moving along through the process. The backstory kind of worked our way down from 8 stories down to 5 stories and going through conceptual to preliminary. The refinement in many ways is sort of a hand drawn schematics to some more refined computer drawings of context. Right off King Street, right by the crosstown. It's sort of in the zone of the future low line park, a lot of big activity going on, and a lot of exciting developments in the area, and a lot of building. The site, front part of the site has a historic house that had been previously renovated. The lot was subdivided so that the rear lot is where the new building is proposed. This kind of gives a little more context. This ownership of 54 Line Street is shared with the ownership of 640 King and 642 King. So the parking is accommodated through the 54 Line Street parking, so the buildings kind of all share the access for this parking. And here you can see the 4-story zone and kind of toward Main Street, and as it transitions back to the 8-story zone. This showing the before and after, at the conceptual level, I kept it in hand drawing level, so a little bit hard to see from this stage, but quite a few hours spent going from hand drawings to computer drawings and levels of refinement and drywall layers for fire ratings and then in the ambulatory sized elevator for the 5-story building. So really, it doesn't look a drastic change, and really the design doesn't necessarily change from the floor plan level. It's just sort of a process of developing the hardline computer drawings and really refining all the details and window sizes. And one thing to point out that we kind of worked through along the way is we have kind of a recess alcove on the rear where we have condenser units mounted on the wall vertically, which allows us to not have them on the roof and get away from roof screening, which everybody was happy about. The 2nd through 4th levels are the same, and this is sort of the refined version of those. Again, besides refinement in the plan and an officially huge elevator for this little building, we've kind of been working out the details of those sorts of things. And the penthouse level, again, really don't necessarily change. Here you can see the hand drawings, how they look. We've got to a level of refinement with the computer CAD elevation drawings, refinement on the base is brick with smooth stucco and score, recessed kind of lines, going with the sort of Charleston tradition of the rusticated stucco base, transitioning to a brick through the middle stories. And, we've got these sort of textured recessed panels with a lot of detail that I'll show a little more close-ups. And like penthouse level has a aluminum cladding system, and we kind of worked our way from more of a shiplap look to sort of an aluminum clad commercial construction. And so zooming in a little bit, the design again hasn't fundamentally changed. It's more sort of a refinement in the computer drawings and refined details. And also looking at the color scheme, we have sort of this buff brick and sort of a off-white color for the stucco base, and then also for the aluminum cladding above. Rear, one thing, just to point out, as we're working out the details for the elevator, there is a little bit of an overbuild for the elevator zone that just so happens to, go up a little bit higher, as you kind of see on the, it'll really never be perceived from the front elevation from the side, and mostly from the rear. You can see just where the elevator goes up. There's a little bit of a height part of it. The way that the parapets are sort of tucked, it's a very minimal detail. As we kind of talked about along the way, we are very, very closely looking at the percentage area allowance for windows as we're, within the sort of 3 to 5 foot range. So those have been worked out, and obviously recognizing those will be sort of closely in line with what's required by the building code and building department as we're moving forward in the process. Side elevation is the same, really. 3D model views show this sort of the stucco base, the brick midsection, and the kind of penthouse level at the top with aluminum panels. Just kind of showing some of the detail. And one thing, I'll show more of the details, but one bit of a refinement actually from the conceptual to the preliminary was sort of a decision to simplify this kind of cornice element, the brick cornice element. It actually previously had kind of a buildup of brick, and then had a little bit of a sort of trimmed out, like with a crown detail. Actually kind of just, it felt like keeping it all brick. So it really just sort of corbels up, stops with the brick, and has a coping, and then transitions fully to top. And I felt like that was an improvement in simplification, and it just, it doesn't stick out as far as it did previously.
Really getting into the details and the brick details, sort of a cornice that's sort of has a complexity and a detail and shadow lines. And then these recessed panels, there's basically sort of a 1 inch step back and then a further step back. And essentially the back work around with bricks would essentially be sort of a half cut brick. And load bearing wise, I'm really trying very strategically to make sure that it actually all stacks up and load bears. It really doesn't need a lot of steel and angles and that sort of thing. Besides the primary openings. The primary cornice, I have these steel I-beam T-shapes with a kind of a laser cut profile. It's sort of a, simple but elegant and kind of commercial, modern, traditional kind of look, and then a classic simple cornice, otherwise transitioning to the aluminum panels from below. Zooming in on some of the details, again, really working out how the brick corbelling cornice and recess kind of works with the stepping back. And essentially for the primary brick, we're at about sort of a 2 inch airspace, allowing for some recessing and pushing back and showing some of the details kind of coming together and getting kind of refined for the cornice. Trying to sort of show it in 3D simultaneously to really see it better, more accurately. We have the railings are steel posts with glass panels to really sort of have a transparent look where you really sort of experience primarily the penthouse. And where there's a roof, where the roof deck is, looking at sort of a pedestal paver system with roof drains. We have really, it's a tight site. We're gonna have a series of internal drains that bring it all down and bring it into a water catchment area that's right between, sort of part of the easement of the lot. Bring the drainage through, and we work with the civil engineer on the drainage plan for that. Balconies, I've kind of looked at some detail, steel railing details, and then actually this is sort of a detail looking at the actual balcony itself being made of C channels with a simple sort of a epay or sort of a long lasting, nice elegant wood, just very, very simple. So sort of steel C channels and wood. Going down to the transition between the stucco base, and again, we're trying to use actual stucco on masonry. So it's the recesses are created by jogging the brick back, and should kind of create the effect with the stucco on the brick, or likely how it would have really been done historically in Charleston. And other details, walkway comes through, and again at the bottom, basically where there's sort of non-masonry, we have the aluminum panel systems. We've been looking at this tannish buff color brick, and with rather than going with a lighter mortar joint, a darker brownish mortar joint, that's sort of a unique kind of a look. Aluminum cladding system, there's a lot of aluminum cladding systems that have the darn little J channels that look like vinyl windows cladding systems. So kind of looking at some nice cladding system that really the edges terminate very cleanly, and you can turn the corners. The aluminum cladding details, I think it'll work nicely to interact with aluminum clad window systems to kind of really all tie together nicely. Lighting wise, very simple. It's residential units, adequate lighting, but nothing over the top, really some simple sconce structures or sconce fixtures, LED Edison bulbs, very simple, minimal, kind of low lighting, and really we would have that at the likely the balcony lights may never turn on, it's ambient light, from downtown Charleston, but having that option, and then along the bottom, a series of these sconces really too. So there's not a lot of need for lighting, exterior lighting on this building besides the pathway lighting and a little bit of accent lighting. Here's some of the 3D views that kind of give the effect a little bit more rendered with stucco, with kind of the color scheme with the buff brick and off-white color. But any questions? And I know if this is the right time to ask, you know, if it made sense, if the details were developing in the right direction to do final by staff or my staff would appreciate it, but anyway, open for questions I can answer.
Any questions if they have?
I do have a couple questions and it's just quite easy. Two, one, you called out the cornices, I mean, at the very, very top is fly ash. What is that?
So what I'm trying to achieve is actually have fly ash, basically that's a composite material that's like not wood, not fiber cement, but it's composite made from fly ash, you know, the byproduct from the.
Yeah, I'm familiar with fly ash. I just trying to picture, does that have a sheen or is it matte?
I mean, basically it would be painted,
Okay.
composite, and you know, really the cornice has, I mean, I'm sorry, the penthouse level in general has this, it would have the aluminum cladding. In my opinion, what I'm trying to achieve just a refined, you know, human scale with attention to detail and, you know, with composite material, I feel like just to me, trying to create that with aluminum would get clunky and, you know, it's a lot of refined details to try to make perfect in the joints. And so you're gonna be up there on that deck looking at this cornice, and I feel like, you know, it could be done very elegantly with some human scale and detail by actually using some actual moldings and being kind of a Charleston traditional, but also modern and, you know, clean, low maintenance materials.
Okay, and thank you. Continuing on that one, I'm glad you have, and it's more just for information, just asking. So right below that fascia board there, is that also fly ash or is that some kind of hardy panel? What is that? That
The
fascia,
fascia probably be that fly ash material also.
so that's like a one piece thing. And then what's the soffit? What would I see if I'm looking up at this?
You know, I mean, probably, I think we're looking at sort of similar, that really besides the corbels or the brackets that were made for steel,
Right?
the rest of the really assembly of the cornice would be sort of a composite painted.
So underneath would be this fly ash stuff too?
Yeah, I think that's the idea that we've been looking at.
Okay. And last question, sorry, it's just, I mean,
Sure.
I'm just trying to understand the detail on, I think it's, I pulled a Mr. Metters and wrote down the page number, 026. Drawings look great, by the way. Your enlarged elevation there where it looks like the steel bends back. Can you explain to me how that would work? I didn't really follow.
At the,
You see what I'm seeing in the elevation? Go right there. The bottom left. it
Yes, you know,
angles in. How's that?
So
How
for
would they
the
do
most
that?
part, where the masonry can be load bearing, I'm trying to make it really be load bearing.
Sure.
You know, I'm personal pet peeve, the running bond brick that appears to be not supported just because it has a steel angle behind it. So to me, I'm expressing the structure, you know, there's
Yeah.
there's an I-beam that miters back and has a little cut to it, and it's structurally functional, but it's also aesthetically, it's kind of just, it's structurally functional, it's also aesthetically functional, rather than just sticking the steel angle up and it, you know, you have to sort of,
So it's expressing the lintel,
it's expressing.
but it says it angle back. I just don't understand what's going
Well,
on.
it would be anchored in through the brick to the cavity behind it.
Okay.
It would be anchored into the brick for sure. And similarly with, see some of the 3D views kind of show it better
I see that you did that in the stucco too.
here. You know, at the window in the middle, I'm thinking that I-beam might notch into the brick and kind of tie it back in and sort of bear on the brick. And the idea is that where the brick can be load bearing, it really does sort of stack on itself, but where there's larger openings, the lintel is expressed with a steel member that shows the structure, presses the structure, but also supports the structure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other board questions? Hearing none, staff, I'm sorry, public comment regarding this application. Hearing none, staff
Okay.
comments and recommendation.
Applicant has made modest revisions to the elevations of the penthouse, which slightly increase the amount of glazing on the elevations, hoping to continue to lighten the appearance of the top. The detailing of the steel T-shaped corbels at the penthouse cornice and the brick corbelling at the fourth floor cornice are details that provide interest and enhance the design, as does the textured patterning in the brick panels in the main body of the structure. Staff support the material and color palette as shown. Staff conditions for approval, it's the condition that you've seen before, Mr. Kraft, which is just if building has an issue with the setback of the windows, it just needs to come back to us. And staff recommendation is preliminary approval with board and staff conditions and final review by staff.
Okay, any response or clarification with that? Okay, board discussion and a motion.
Well, I'll start since I asked a bunch of questions. I wasn't here for the first go round. But I think it's fine. I like it. I think it's pretty well done. I think there is some thought needed, a little more thought on some of those details. I think it will be harder to do, but I'm very comfortable with the board is with that being handled and staff. Not worried about it. It's just, I think, I'm looking at going, I think some of that's tough. My only comment, I'm probably in the minority, and this is way down the road, is I didn't think that you needed a darker color mortar. I know this is kind of random on the brick. I think you've got a lot going on in this building, and to me, it ought to be very simple. It's just a really nice proportion. I don't think you need to, see personally, a lot going on with the brick. I think the brick ought to just read simple with all the details you have and not accentuate even more with a different color. So that's just me, but I think the details and the design is developed really nicely from last time. So I'm in support of it.
Other board comments? I'll jump in real quick and say that it has developed well. I think that when you have unusual materials, it's really like optimal to bring those to the board at this stage of review. Like I'm generally familiar with fly ash, but that actually could be any number of products. And so I think that even if this goes to final review by staff, I think you definitely need to get samples of that material to get it to the board, or get it to staff for approval at final. You do not want to have material choices lingering during your mock-up review. Any other comments or motion?
So, there is a lot going on with this building, and I will be in the minority with this, but I would like to see that material.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. I mean, that's what you're going to see on unusually, it's not typical, but you're going to see that cornice, the top, probably more than you see the bottom.
Yeah.
So it's key to understand what that material is. I'd be okay with that.
Sorry, Trey, this whole agenda is stuff that we've seen before. So okay, well, that does make sense to me. This is a highly visible project, Any other comments or motion?
Sure, I think a motion for preliminary approval with board and staff comments.
I'll second that. With the requirement, if you could add to bring a sample of the cornice and top material.
Well, if they come back for final review for the board, then that would be.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so in that case, we have a motion made by Mr. Metters for preliminary approval with board and staff comments, seconded by Mr. Bello. I'll go down the roll. Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
No, not in favor.
Okay. Mr. Bello,
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Metters,
Yay,
Mr. Watkins,
Yeah, in favor.
and I vote likewise. The motion carries 4-1. Yep, all right, 68 Spring.
Right, agenda item number 5 is 68 Spring, which is a category 1 building circa 1858 in the Old City District. They are requesting conceptual and preliminary review for a 3-story addition on the west side of an existing building. Improvements include a new elevator for accessibility, as well as rooms for electrical and fire sprinkler systems and new light fixtures for the existing building. First, we're going to show the area in question. The other thing I want to add, which technically is my first staff comment, but for the benefit of the board and the public, to note that this application does differ from the application previously reviewed in April, and that the scope of work is on a west addition. There no longer is an east addition as there was previously. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Okay.
And now we're ready for.
Okay. Thank you all. Good afternoon. My name is Vince Graham, and with my longtime friend and neighbor, Bob Holt, we purchased this building about a year ago. And we live in the neighborhood, 700 feet from the building. Bob has been doing real estate development, new and restoration work in the peninsula since 1983. I've done my share too, and Moore Square and involved with Reed Burgess, Capitol Street. I wanted to introduce our team who's here, Erica Harrison. Y'all know her well. She's got over 17 years of voluntary experience in Charleston. Our associates too, Jalen Johnson is back here, and Tyler Powell, two College of Charleston graduates. We have our architect, needs no introduction, David Thompson, with his associates Savannah Puckett and Lily Knox are here too. And batting cleanup, our illustrious structural engineer Craig Bennett is also with us. Most of its life, as y'all may know, this before it had a life as the Parpellis Manuscript Library. It was St. James Methodist Church. And the motto of that church was in the heart of the city for the heart of the people. And just for context, this site is located 1.6 miles from White Point Garden, 1.6 miles from Magnolia Cemetery, a mile from the Ashley, and a mile from the Cooper River. So it really is the heart of the city. It's also in the heart of our neighborhood, Kenneboro, Elliottboro, which are bound by Meeting and President Streets and Morris Street and the Coast Town. And it sits right in the center. We've all walked or driven by it 1,000 times and probably wondered what's going on there. We did too, Bob and I did too. I just want to point out that each member of our team feels a profound sense of excitement, responsibility, and stewardship toward restoring this building to its grandeur. With that, I'll turn it over to David Thompson. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince, and thank you, city staff and board and the public that's come to see this as well. This project is seeking placement on the National Register of Historic Places and federal tax credits for preservation. The nomination received unanimous approval this month at state level and is now undergoing national review. As such, our team has used the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties as a guide during the design process. The board comment from April reading of previously proposed work was to provide a more complete and detailed inventory of the scope and repair work to be performed. A detailed repair narrative and supporting drawings and specifications was submitted by our team in May and was reviewed and approved by staff without comments or objections. As such, this proposal is primarily focused on the proposed addition to the west side of the existing building. Under the heading Life Safety, the Secretary of the Interior standards state, when undertaking work on historic buildings, it's necessary to consider the impact that meeting life safety codes will have on both exterior and interior spaces, features, and finishes. Coordinating with code officials early in the project planning will help ensure that code requirements can be met in a historic building without negatively impacting its character. So we met on January 17th of this year with Chief Building Official Ken Granada and Captain Rick Flutie of the Fire Department. During that meeting, it was stated that the use of the existing third floor will require an accessible route and a second code compliant means of egress. To satisfy those requirements, an elevator must be provided, as a lift is not allowed for more than one story of travel, and a new stair must be constructed to provide a second means of egress from the building's third and second floors. Secretary of the Interior standards state that it's often necessary to make modifications to a historic building to make it compliant with accessibility code requirements. Work must be carefully planned and undertaken in a manner that results in minimal or no loss of historic exterior and interior character defining spaces, features, or finishes. The goal should be to provide the highest level of access with the least impact to the historic building. Oops, I got the clicker glitch.
Oh, sometimes it helps to point back to the laptop.
Yeah, if you point at the laptop, because that's where it's
Right,
receiving.
right, and you go left. This is the previous bird's eye view of the previously proposed massing for the third, three-story west side addition. And comparatively, this is our current proposal seen from the same bird's eye perspective. At the April reading of this project, the primary board concern about the proposed addition to the west side of the property was that the addition was too large and altered or concealed more historic fabric of an existing structure than what is required. Through a lengthy planning study, the team was able to reconfigure the first floor plan of the historic building to include 2 of the 4 required restrooms. Further study of the third floor allowed us to include the remaining restrooms there. By doing so, we reduced the footprint of the proposed addition significantly. So this depicts the previously proposed west side addition in red, overlaid on the current proposal, something in the neighborhood of 67% of the square footage in parking. Go to 105. please. Additional board comments about the proposed addition and criticism of how the addition connected to the building. In response, the current proposed design includes an elongated and significantly recessed hyphen. The relief created by this reveals more of the historic building when viewed from the street, and only 1 bay of windows and doors need to be removed, with no alterations to the masonry openings to make that connection, as opposed to 2 bays previously. Another previous board comment, as well as requests from staff, were to reduce the height of the addition. The addition includes an elevator with its required height clearances, and all exterior HVAC equipment is designed to fit on the roof of the proposed addition. While the height of the proposal is primarily driven by its proportions, the mechanical requirements in their screening were also of consideration. The height of the proposed addition is appropriate because it allows a distinction between the parapet height of the hyphen and the main stair volume. To reduce the height further gives the proposal a less elegant appearance. The heights are differentiated from the existing building in that they do not align with the column capitals nor the pediment frieze. The staff comments required we restudy the architectural direction of the proposal. Some comments directly asked that it be of a distinct and lighter appearance than the historic building. Our team has since created detailed studies of alternate architectural directions, including a modern glass box, a modern copper box, and a version using wood siding. It's our opinion that all of these architectural languages called more attention to the addition rather than less. Secretary of the Interior standards state that a new exterior addition to a historic building should be considered in a rehabilitation project only after determining that requirements for a new use cannot be successfully met by altering non-significant interior spaces. It further states that a new addition must be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and design of the historic building. New additions can be any architectural style, traditional, contemporary, or a simplified version of the historic building. However, there must be a balance between differentiation and compatibility to maintain the historic character and identity of the building being enlarged. End quote. We agree with these statements and believe this proposal achieves the necessary balance between compatibility and differentiation. The differentiation is in the details. Fenestration, proportions, patterns, and shapes are different than the original. The detailing of the architectural elements is based on the historic, but simplified and derivative rather than replica. The primary form of the stair tower differentiates itself from the original architecture through the curved facade. The shape also diminishes the massing as viewed from the public right of way. The building shape is wed to the construction methods and materials in the traditional masonry and stucco method appropriate to the form It includes subtle battered openings at primary fenestration. The historical overview outlines historic materials, including load-bearing masonry, Portland cement-based stucco, lime-based whitewash, cast stone, and copper. All materials with a history which we are proposing to use in compatible ways, yet distinct from the materials of the original St. James Methodist Church completed in 1858. We're offering a design to provide minimal required life safety and egress components in a manner which is deferential and complementary to the historic icon. We're asking for your approval of the application.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? Okay, any public?
I have, as always. So, David, I'm looking at your section on sheet 202. It sounds like part of the reason the height is the two reasons. One, you like the proportions, but also to hide the mechanical.
Yes, to both.
And so when I look at your section, and you probably don't have it completely figured out, but you've got a pretty tall curve. And it's getting in the weeds a little bit, but yeah, my 302 is a different one. But it shows, you know, a curve of this high, basically. And if you're part of the height's being driven by the mechanical, is that accurate? I guess is what I'm getting at.
Glad you asked, because it has fully been designed by mechanical engineers. So all of the HVAC for the entire building, including the proposed first floor use, has been specified. Those curves are seismic, and they are unfortunately that tall.
So I can blame
We try.
Mr. Bennett for that.
Actually, no, you can blame the mechanical engineer. That said, if Mr. Bennett wants to get in deep with the mechanical engineer and we can alter it, we're happy to look at it. I mean, I think there is some nuances, and I think there's some rearrangement that could happen to start to get minimal reduction just based on sort of the angle. But I don't think that's the ultimate driver for why we think it looks the way it looks.
So you said that height based on the proportions.
We did.
All right, second question, and it sounds like this is, I know the answer, but did you consider alternate materials just for the height portion?
We did. We actually went through, because it's been a while since we were here and we weren't here the first time. It's been a couple months. And I think this group's probably had no less than 4 charrettes. And it's quite a brain trust. But we did consider a fully glazed hyphen. We thought it was louder. My take on a hyphen is that it needs to move to the background. It needs to be quiet. And it needs to allow for a pause between part A and part B, and it's part C. The more detail it had, the louder it spoke. In fact, once we landed on this direction, there are 3 versions of these elevations and renderings we did with slightly larger. And each time, the group consensus, myself included, is that these proportions were better. And I think when you look at actually this facade, we get so used to that 2D view from the street of the kind of iconic Greek revival that we forget how fenestrated this facade is. And so the less glazing in this, actually, the more differentiation we think we're getting from the existing.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Not, any public comment regarding this application?
Hello, I'm Belvin Olsov on 428 Gray Street, and I served as the museum attendant for the Carpelius Manuscript Museum for a number of years. So I love this building very much. And not having seen these previously, my reaction to the proposal to have an addendum that tries as much as possible to be of a piece, you know, using traditional materials without sticking out or feeling like an imposition on the building, strikes me as a good strategy. So I just want to register as a member of the public who just likes this building a whole bunch, that I think forcing something that's more differentiated would feel wrong as someone who spent a lot of time inside the building and thinks it's a very special part of Charleston.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, board members, my name is Marion Hawkins, president of the Canberra Elliott Neighborhood Association. This has been a long neglected architectural gem in our neighborhood. I have a personal connection. I've occupied an office in the ground floor for several years. So I've grown to love this building very much. And myself and many residents were quite delighted that long-term residents of Bob Hall and Vince Graham purchased this building and are now stewarding this thing through a very sense of development. Well, we'd like to thank David Thompson and his team, as well as the development team, for their engagement with our neighborhood association throughout the whole process. The latest design complements this Class 1 building and reflects a sensitivity to this historic structure. The neighborhood association voted overwhelmingly to support this application, and we would greatly encourage the board to approve. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Justin Schroeder with the Historic Charleston Foundation. We'd like to thank the applicants for taking the time to show us the updated application. We feel that the revised addition is much more sympathetic in its massing and architectural direction. While this is a large addition to a Category 1 building, we feel the applicant has successfully balanced the needs for the programmatic and utility improvements by using the new addition that will not only minimize impacts on the interior of the structure, but will also complement the historic building architecturally. Our only recommendation, and thank you for the applicant for clarifying a little more similar to Eddie's comments, would be to increase the proportion of glazing on the hyphen addition that connects the new addition to the historic buildings. We recommend conceptual approval. Thank you.
Anna Catherine Alexander with the Preservation Society of Charleston, and we appreciate the applicant reaching out to us on this project. We continue to support the comprehensive exterior and interior rehabilitation proposed to ensure the long-term preservation of this Category 1 building. We also support providing accessible entry to this building while minimizing harm to historic material and character. Since the previous review, we also appreciate the significant restudy of height, scale, and mass of the proposed addition. And in particular, the reduced footprint and narrower hyphenated connection result in much more sensitive engagement with the west elevation. We do, however, encourage continued study of the architectural direction to further improve the relationship between the proposed addition and historic building. We really appreciate the applicant's diligent reference of the Secretary of the Interior Standards, but feel that differentiation could be strengthened by incorporating more glazing and reducing the amount of blank wall space, especially at the hyphen, which would create clearer distinction between the structures and lessen the visual impact to the historic building. Reducing the parapet height of the addition would also support this goal. Thank you to the board and the applicant for consideration of these comments as the project moves forward.
Any further public comment? Hearing none. Please staff comments.
Sure. First, I'm just going to quote from the previous board and staff conditions related to the current scope of work. First was, quote, find a way to allow this addition to be accomplished while reducing height, scale, and mass. Second, quote, hyphen needs to be more pronounced. Third, quote, bring down parapet as much as possible while still screening the mechanical units. Fourth, quote, provide more visual separation between the mass of the addition and the historic building. Next, quote, articulate the blank wall portion of the west facade of the west addition with fenestration. And finally, quote, reconsider architectural direction, end quote, with board discussion emphasizing a lighter glazed mass that would be architecturally distinct from the historic structure. The applicant followed board discussion by moving the restrooms and storage into the historic building, which allowed the footprint of the addition to be substantially reduced and more of the historic structure to be revealed, and are applauded for this effort. The applicant also introduced a hyphen connecting the elevator stair addition to the historic building as requested at previous meeting. Staff support the height and scale of the hyphen as it allows for a clear reading of the entablature from all directions. The placement of the hyphen allows the applicant to follow BAR Charleston Standard Policy Statement number 9, quote, additions and modifications should be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its context and setting remain unimpaired. Staff find the height, scale, and mass of the main stair elevator addition still problematic and obscuring too much of the entablature. The height of it is not reduced in a dramatic way as the hyphen does. Staff suggests continued study of the placement of the mechanicals, perhaps more towards the north of the volume to allow for height reduction and or continued study of mechanical placement somewhere else on the site, for instance, the northeast corner. Staff support the scale of the addition in plan. However, because of the architectural direction of the addition, the mass predominates in the reading of the south and west elevations. Staff also require continued restudy of the architectural direction of the addition. BAR Charleston Standards Policy Statement Number 7 notes to respect the authenticity of the historic structure and its context and setting. The new alterations or additions should be clearly discernible from the old. The differentiation may or may not be stylistic and may be as subtle as a change in building footprint, material, or other means. The applicant's change of footprint to a curved form moves in the right direction. Other means by which the new addition can be differentiated from the historic include less mimesis of traditional divided light patterns, less traditional articulation of base, middle, and top via string coursing, and either a change from masonry to alternate materials to provide differentiation, or if masonry is preferred, then more fenestration to lighten the perception of mass, increase the distinction between old and new, and providing a lighter touch to the historic building. Increasing the amount of fenestration in the hyphen in particular will help to lighten the touch to the historic building, reveal more glimpses through glazing, and reduce the perception of heavy mass that the solid blank masonry indicates currently. Staff recommendation is for deferral for restudy with staff comments.
Okay, opportunity for applicant clarification and response.
Yeah, well, yeah. Just a couple of specifics. Am I allowed to take that? Sure. I think a couple of items just to be clear on in the drawing, since I didn't touch every page. In terms of fenestration, you can see the existing building fenestration demonstrated up here, proposed here. I think they're wildly different in terms of pattern, proportion, not to mention construction of the windows. But still being in a compatible language, that's going to be timeless. And then in terms of the specific detailing, and I would say the use of mimicry, I don't have a problem learning from that building. So we've gone out and we've detailed the existing conditions as a reference point, and you will see similarities and you will see where we've drawn from. But you also will see verbatim, I think, from number 9, change in scale of those, change in use of them, reduction and simplification. So I feel like when we're talking about a building of this importance, that has a classical language that holds true today, it's a perfectly reasonable direction to go in to pull from those, as long as we're not verbatim repeating in the same usage.
Thank you. All right, board discussion.
So I'll start. So to be clear where I'm starting from, I agree with what Vince Graham started with and what everyone else has said. It's a magnificent structure, right? No question. So everything that I'm going to comment on is based on that and that only. David, I think that this has moved significantly from where we started, so I think that's great. My immediate thought was, and I'm sure you've already looked at it, and the reasons why it's more difficult, but if the connector could be one bay back in that back window, which would expose more of the west elevation from the south elevation, and how that would reconfigure what your addition is. But there is one window bay further back to the north. Christian, maybe wants to say something. Is that all right?
I'm sorry, I was
Yeah.
rapt attention. I just
I was getting in the queue.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I know you're probably gonna talk about the easement, but let Mr. Metters finish his comment and then.
So that is significant for me, and I imagine that you would have some reason why that didn't come back that way. And I think it's imperative for the physical connector to be of a different material than the new building and the church. And the detailing, picking up on the detailing for the new structure off the old structure is not important to me. It can be appropriately done for a new structure. Then if that glazing calls attention to you, I think what that means is that it's different from the original structure and the new structure. And I think that that's appropriate. I think it has to be appropriate material, and I personally think that it should be glazing. I think it should be some form of maybe total glass, and if not, substantial glass.
Talking about the hyphen.
Yeah, the hyphen. And that's it.
Okay. Give you a second to respond to the issue of the.
I got excited. I mean, I probably should have muted it before. So there is an easement with the Abbey structure that occupies that portion of that rear corner that is positioning the addition.
So that's that dotted line that's on the plan.
You can see it here.
And what's the substance of that easement again? It's to provide access.
Answer that question. So, obviously on the site plan, you may have seen, this is a 10 by 20 area that is actually located on our property. So when the Abbey and our property were subdivided back in the late 1990s, their property corner hits here and our property corner hits here. So that meant that if you were coming off of Percy Street, you would not be able to access the other side, which is on Cummings Street. So this 10 by 20 is that pedestrian walkway so that they can actually access the other side of their property. So we cannot build inside of it. We cannot build anything in it, so because we have to leave it open for them to be able to access the other half of the property. So if you look at the Abbey, it expands from Cumming to Percy and onto Spring Street. But where their property corners touch, there isn't a point of ingress or egress to get to the other side. So we had to give, so as a part of that easement agreement, that 10-foot by 20 area is their access to the other side of the building.
So, and then, Mr. Chairman, I just want to follow that up. It's so important to me to continue to expose so much of that west elevation. Has it been explored to see if you can buy some of that back, some of that easement back? It sounds like 10 by 20. Is that what's necessary to meet a code from Percy to Cumming? Because if you know, if that were possible, then that could move back and that would be, I'm just pointing that up.
Not from my knowledge, unless one of the leaders wants to speak to it.
It's necessary because they
Ms.
have.
Harrison, I just need that, that's all right, just so that people at home can only see.
Okay.
We have a huge audience.
Listen, sometimes I'm in the audience for the other boards and there can be up to like 15 people.
So it's, and answering that question, so when you look at that site, when you're actually physically on the space, they have a walk path. And so that area is necessary to not only also for staging, for them to be able to stage and move and be able to access their building. So it's not only just for walking through, it's also for accessing the building so they can do repairs as well. So that, and there is a mutuality to this easement agreement as well, but that part was what was necessary for them to conduct repairs and also to provide a walkway.
And I'll just add one thing. It would be our preference to be able to do that too, but it's simply bottom line charity that they need to access their.
Okay. You done? Okay.
well, I'll jump in where I agree with a lot of what James said, and I somewhat agree with a lot of the city comments. First off, I wasn't here last time, but significantly improved from last time. This is much better direction. My office is the next building west, and every time I get coffee, I see this west facades. I drink a lot of coffee, so I see a lot. And I know the building really well, and I'm really excited to see this team, great team on it. I think there's a balance between differentiating and being compatible. I mean, I think you've got an opportunity to make this addition beautiful and still not compete with this beautiful church. So I'm zeroing in on the hyphen, kind of like you did. I don't think it needs to be all glass necessarily. I trust the architect's judgment if it's too much, but I think there are other opportunities other than just putting a single window in there. I think that could be studied. I don't know if that needs to come, if that's a deferral, and maybe it's conceptual with that as a comment, but to me, that's the one thing that's bothering me. I do think there could be some study with the parapet coming down. Just ask for that. And again, I just think there's opportunity. I don't have a problem with the direction of I think the circular move was good. That's sort of the first thing I thought of. Why not do something completely different from the form? I don't have a problem with that language being stucco and cast stone or real stone, whatever they're using. It's just, you've got that fine line between trying to match it exactly, but not really. You're going to have clad windows and stone and stucco, and it's kind of not quite the same. So I think you've got to walk that fine line, So anyway, I'm kind of rambling, but I think there's opportunity with what you have. I just think that hyphen, to me, it's almost like even if it was a different color, just a different material is what I would do, but it needs a little more than just a single thing. And then also, this is too super minor, but get all this trouble and you put a canvas awning for your entry. Seems like there's better. I know that Mr. Thompson can come up with something that works a little better that well. So that was my piece.
Yeah, my comments on this one, I just appreciate the applicant's study of the prior board comments. Wasn't here for the prior one, but have certainly looked at and reviewed the record. Appreciate you all studying what was asked before and looking at it, hearing what the board has to say and some of the public comments. I do believe, and agree with some of the other board members, is relate to the hyphen itself and the materials there, and would like to see some study on that. And then I would also echo the comments on the height of the parapets. It sounds like y'all have already studied that and may not have a whole lot of options, but would certainly like to see that height reviewed. And y'all may say we're then the line on that, but those would be my comments on this particular one.
Okay. I have one question for city staff. In our notes, it says requesting conceptual / preliminary approval. Are they requesting both?
They are requesting both, but since they don't have conceptual, then we have to write both in the line.
Beautiful. So I'll take somewhat of a different route from my colleagues, and the key word that stuck out to me was authenticity from the comments. Coincidentally, I think the Methodist tradition is much more conservative and plain stated, which I think is exactly what sort of architectural style you've developed in something that is actually atraditional to a Methodist church with the Corinthian columns. So I appreciate the understanding of context, both in the initial program of the building and then also in the context of the city. The fully glazed hyphen is almost too modern for it to be next to such a unique structure with that sort of tradition. A different material wouldn't make sense in the precedent of the other additions to church buildings in particular, as mentioned in the application over at Mother Emanuel and Trinity and elsewhere. So I think that there's an opportunity to move forward and maybe continue a bit of restudy, but to at least offer conceptual approval.
Okay. I actually, I see the board's focus on that. I think that's appropriate. I think it's totally plausible to have this addition be the same basic material as the building it's attaching itself to. But there will be a joint right there where this hyphen meets the existing building. This will be up to Mr. Bennett in some ways, but there's going to be a joint there that's going to be expressed. What shows up in the renderings right now is just a continuous transition of stucco, which ain't going to happen. Because this is going to be built as another building, just slap dab against the existing one. So there's a practical reason for considering an alternative material or a contrasting material for the hyphen itself, because it might be the means by which you disguise that sometimes rather ugly joint. But I agree that this is something that could probably be resolved as the project moves towards preliminary. And I guess as we make a motion, let's make sure that we're clear about whether we're addressing, conceptual or preliminary. Just for total clarity of record.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
For referral with board and staff comments.
Okay. All right, we have a motion for deferral with board and staff comments. Do we have a second? I'm afraid, well, I'll second it just to get it on the table, although I have a feeling I know what's going to happen. All right, so we have a motion made and properly seconded for deferral with board and staff comments. Let's go down the roll. Mr. Bello, how do you vote?
I was going to ask if it's appropriate to have any board discussion.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I understand where you're going with it. Before we vote, I just want to say, I am comfortable with conceptual with further study. I mean, I think the applicant knows enough. They've obviously spent a lot of time, in my opinion. And I know staff's looking at it a little more harder, but I think there's a general consensus that the direction is good. The height, scale, and mass is good. It's just one area to me. And I don't think that should be enough for deferral personally. I wasn't here last time, so.
Yes, so I'll respond to that.
Okay.
The staff's position is for default. And if it had been other than that, it would have been other than that. And because she asked for the board, or suggested to the board it should be deferred, I think it's appropriate for it to come back to the board. If she had done otherwise, then I understand where you're coming from. But in this case, and in any case that's similar to this, when staff asks the board to think about deferral, we can think about it, we can talk about it, but I also honor their position and think that that is the reason that I have requested a deferral with board and staff comments.
Okay. Any further discussion before we call the roll? Okay. I'll call the roll. Mr. Bello, how do you vote?
Nay opposed.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
No, not in favor.
Great. Mr. Metters?
Yeah.
Mr. Watkins?
Nay.
And I will vote nay also, so the motion does fail. I will entertain another motion.
Well, I guess you know what my motion's going to be.
What are your options?
And first of all, just as a response, I respect that. Obviously, after having sat in that seat for a few years, I would move for conceptual approval with further study of the hyphen. I'm leaving it wide open. But you heard enough board comments on that.
So nothing on the parapet, since there was a lot of board discussion. I just want to make sure that the.
Sure.
incredibly
I mean,
specific.
further study of the parapet, I think that's part of the board.
Would you rather keep it open to board and staff comments?
Well, there's enough differentiation. I think it has to be a specific.
Yeah, because there's a little contrast.
Yeah, we probably
Let me restate.
Yeah.
So conceptual approval, further study of the parapet height. And related specifically due to the height of the mechanical equipment. And further study the direction of the or articulation of the hyphen portion. That's a lot of interpretation.
So
for
the architectural direction of the hyphen.
Yes.
There's not enough.
Sorry, I
time
need
to
help with
spend.
these motions.
We're used to very brief motions here. You go to DRB, it's like 3 paragraphs.
Small.
Epistle. All right, so what I've captured here, and let me know if this is correct, is conceptual approval would further study the parapet height versus the mechanical equipment height. And further study of the articulation of the hyphen portion of the project. Yes. So, all right, so we have that motion made by Mr. Bello.
And I'll second.
Mr. Brown seconds that one. All right, I'll go down the roll. Mr. Bello, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Brown,
Yay in favor.
Mr. Matters.
Nay.
Okay. Mr. Watkins.
Yay in favor.
And I vote yay in favor. The motion carries 4-1.
Thank you.
Mr. Thompson, I want to compliment you on one of the best presentations by an architect. Apologies to the table not standing that we've seen during my tenure. It was very thorough and very well done.
Appreciate you guys making this project. I want to do this. Such a great session. Yeah, that makes sense. In the house, right?
All right.
It's in my.
Okay, all right, so you'll let Howard 335 preload. Okay, all right, we'll move on to 35 Preload Street. Application number 6.
So 35 Prelude Street is in the French Quarter, circa 1814. It's not rated and it's in the Olden Historic District, and they are requesting conceptual review for rehabilitation, including select exterior improvements, a new accessible entrance, new screening of the rooftop mechanicals, provisions for new sound screening at the rooftop terrace, repointing, all bunch of great general and great stuff. Why don't we go ahead to the location? I just want to add, while the location is up, subsequent, based on the deadlines, both for AR and zoning has now met and given approval to the applicant for use of an event space, and part of that approval also has to deal with an agreement with the neighbor for sound mitigation in order to be able to get a building permit. So I just wanted to say that at the top instead of waiting for staff comments, so you could consider that during the presentation. Otherwise, we're ready for applicant.
Okay. Okay, I'm Simmons Young here tonight on behalf of my client, who is a prospective buyer for 35 Prelo. There have been a few BAR proposals in front of you. This is totally different program. It is for an event space. And we feel this is also the latest touch that's been proposed for the building. So on the screen is the 1970s photo before the rooftop addition, when I think the Colony House was in here. So the roof was occupied, but there was not the rooftop addition that you'll see in a moment. In 1816, the land was filled in. It was marsh up until then. In 1820, the building was built. And since that time, it has been cotton warehouses, a coffee roastery, Sokol furniture, Wagner, dry goods storage, and a few other things. The next photo is on the far left. You can see what happened after the earthquake of 1886. The front of the building fell off, and 1940, you can see the gable roof was restored at that time. The next photo over, there was a big fire that destroyed that gable roof. And then in 1969, it became the Colony House with a nice interior image there. And that renovation won a Carolopoulos Award. It preserved the exterior walls. It was a full replacement of windows with, and also floor joist and all that good stuff. So it's a concrete floor structure with open web steel joists on the floors. Including the ground floor, which has significant saltwater intrusion. Talk about in a moment.
Okay, so here's the existing conditions, a few things that we're doing. It is perhaps a maintenance project, is an extremely expensive maintenance project. And the owner has, or the potential buyer has engaged contractors for pricing and architects and engineers and MEP to try and figure out what this building needs. So sounding, fixing and painting the spalled stucco is what you'll see. Replacement of the deteriorated windows that are not original. And shutters also, and then rebalancing the fire escape on the south side of the building. Refurbishing the exterior sconces. On the north side of the building, there's a bunch of sort of abandoned infrastructure, gas lines and whatnot that would pull off. It's, you know, a lot of steel penetrations that started to cause cracks, so we would repoint the brick and get that stuff off there. On the right-hand side, you can see sloped roofs, and we would replace the bubble-looking skylights with sort of flat V-Lux skylights and make them a little bit more attractive, and re-roof as well. The back corner of the building has foundation problems, so we would repair that. I think we've got a good, yeah, on the left-hand side here. You can see the crack in the brick, so we would repair the foundation, repoint, and to be developed. That scope is to be developed as we move forward. We will be replacing the rooftop mechanical completely, and we'll see in a minute what that will mean for the building. Let's see. That ADA ramp in the middle is in the right of way for the city of Charleston, so we would get rid of that and pull that interior to the building. And then on the upper, on the right-hand side, you see the roof terrace, and we would resurface that and install a new tile roof. Also, there's some of the niches in the building. Niches have been, you can see on the left-hand side, they have little planter boxes with condensate lines that drip into them. So we would remove those and get rid of that water problem. Okay. And then these are the windows, some of the existing conditions, the shutters, the second from the right on the top line, you can kind of see how they're falling apart in a lot of locations. And then these are insulated glass windows I mentioned on the upper floors. We're proposing to go back with clad insulated glass on those floors, simulated divided light and simulated lights and divider bars. On the first floor, we propose to keep the arched wood windows, which are salvageable. We think they can be braced. They're a little bit unstable, but we think they can be braced on the inside, and then replace the other windows with single pane glass. The idea being at ground level, you notice that a lot more than anything above your head, which must have been the approach when it was done. The other existing conditions, this just shows the context. One venue range on the right-hand side, you can see their windows align with ours, and we'll show that in the drawing in a minute. The venue, the rooftop, off to the left. The building occupies 100% of the lot. There is no parking. We've got a variance for 66 parking spaces. I think that you'll see in your packet, hopefully the neighborhood association wrote a letter of support. They're enthusiastic about the building coming back to life after 2 failed attempts and 4 years of being neglected. We're excited too. This is the first floor. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Besides to say on the left-hand side, that's where the new ramp is coming in, and that's on Porter Street, the south side of the building. We're reducing the size of the kitchen, and all the entrance locations are changed, not altered in any significant way. This is the existing second floor, largely the same layout. Mechanical, you can see on the upper right-hand side. We are working with Charleston Engineering to figure, we will be working with Charleston Engineering to figure out exactly what that is. We know it's plenty of space, but then we would screen that mechanical equipment because it's very visible if you're walking from East Bay Street towards this structure. And third floor, again, you can see the skylights that we're working on consolidating and cleaning up. Resurfacing the roof, and then this is the rooftop, and we'll show an elevation how we're dealing with this, proposing to deal with this sound mitigation issue, particularly on the east side. Let's see. I think this is just a roof plan. We are keeping the existing turn metal roof and recoating it. Good, those are kind of hard to come by now. So streetscapes, just to show where our building is, where 35 Prelo is in relation to some of the other structures nearby. The main one to consider, I think, is this one where one venue, the city built these or sold, built these condos after the Colony House, somewhere in mid-Colony House times. And the roof structure is on the left-hand side, so it's a mid-level on the second floor apartments. This is the east elevation and showing the windows that we are proposing to remove and others that are being proposed to stay, just the arched windows. We're refurbishing the existing lighting, and we're getting close to the end. I know my time is tight. And the decorative metal guardrails. So the steel frame is on the roof structure. We've tried to take the lightest approach possible, keeping in mind Charleston Standard 9 about removable structure. So this would be a frame to which the sound curtains could be applied, and as part of the setup for the operations of events, that would be something that happened if the event goes beyond 9 o'clock or whatever the time is in the letter. This is a south elevation, the reworking of that door. The ADA entrance is the most significant thing. There's actually screening, like a sort of screen porch vestibule thing there now with those windows beyond. So it'll be a marked improvement. And then the north elevation, there are plywood panels that cover part of these abandoned windows, so we would remove those and figure out the best way to repair that, whether it's infill with masonry infill with stucco to match the rest of the building. Developed. There's the mechanical screening on the lower right. And then this is the west side of the building, again with the mechanical screening on the lower left. And the new skylights. This is a product that may be typical of what we're trying to develop, and these are panels which would be installed again during this particular event time, and then uninstalled. We are looking at there's a storage closet on the roof, and they would be similar to flood panels where you would install when you have flood panels, you install them if there's a hurricane coming and you have to store them on site. Same thing would be proposed for this. And the other thing about the agreement, which I can read excerpts if you like, it also has to contain light, so we feel like that's an important part of the curtains. And those are, whoops, I do want to, those are the two perspective sketches that show the view from the street. And with that, I will close.
Okay, any questions of the applicant by the board or staff?
Always have one. On this view, Simmons, the steel frame does not continue across this back to the right there.
Correct.
So the sound panels only need to be on the one facade. Sound only goes that way.
Well,
Doesn't go the other way?
as far as one vendor range is concerned, yes, but however, subsequent to
Like
this.
I go over.
Yeah. subsequent to this application, another a resident from the west side did approach us and say, can you put this on the west side too? So we are ready to move forward with that, and I think the next development, you'll see that and possibly a bit more.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Did you?
Only other question I had, Simmons, on that is the, with that steel frame and the sound attenuation, have y'all looked at doing it any other way than these curtains, or y'all consider that?
We have a little bit, we've looked at glass, and considered, after some discussions with staff and the preservation groups. And the problem that we find with glass is that it still has the same sound, it's actually maybe reverberates a bit more, so, and light is not contained, so. And then there's the 150-mile-an-hour winds that may require a little bit more structure, so we think that not having glass up there is better. And in fact, we would probably have to install curtains if we put glass up.
And so, thinking about the connectors, which we probably won't see, but those being stainless steel going down into that masonry, if they are going into masonry.
Yeah, with that, we have an opportunity with the resurfacing of that roof to look at that. So hopefully we're staying.
Okay, any public comment regarding this application?
Anna Catherine Alexander with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We appreciate the applicant reaching out on this project. We are glad to see new life brought back to this long vacant historic building and support the proposed scope of rehabilitation, with one caveat that for a building of this age in the old historic district, we would encourage replacement windows to be authentic wood, true divided light in place of insulated aluminum clad, even though we realize there are insulated windows there now. Regarding the sound screening at the rooftop terrace, we are comfortable with the concept of a temporary adjustable solution that's reversible and results in minimal visual impact. However, more information and more detailed renderings are needed to evaluate the appearance and functionality of this particular product. Precedent images would be helpful to understand how this feature will be experienced from the public right of way with and without acoustic curtains. So we ask that this information be provided before this portion of the project advances. Thank you.
Okay.
Justin Schwebler, with the Historic Charleston Foundation. We'd again like to thank the applicants for taking the time to meet with us prior to tonight's meeting. While we're generally supportive of the proposed exterior rehabilitation, we do have some concerns with the rooftop terrace. The steel frame and fabric curtain assembly is the least impactful design option as it's reversible and minimally visible when the curtains are not installed. We do have concerns, however, over the enforceability of removing the curtains when events are not happening and the long-term maintenance challenges of the system. A more permanent installation like a louvered piazza screen may be appropriate along the primary elevations, but will obviously have a much more substantial visual impact. And we would like to thank the applicant for trying to solve a difficult design challenge with the least invasive solution for the historic building. But we encourage robust board discussion over the materials presented in the application. Thank you.
Any further public comment? Hearing none?
Sure.
Staff.
Staff approve of the repair and replacement work that needs to be done to support the continued life of this building. I'm not gonna read this whole list. I'm gonna say that it is everything except that relates to the sound abatement on the roof. Otherwise, everything else is good with us. Staff require restudy of the steel substructure and sound curtains being proposed. Staff encourages either a completely temporary solution to sound abatement on the roof to be installed and removed for every event, or a more permanent solution that is elevated architecturally and complements the existing historic structure. If the applicant pursues restudy of a more permanent solution, staff requires that it circumnavigate the entire cornice at that level to include Gendron Street. And I think of the first historic photo where it shows a decorative railing going all the way around. That's what I mean by circumnavigate. The last sentence was based on the fact that staff had not seen the zoning requirement towards lighting. So when I say encouraging an exploration flows focusing on transparent, that's because I only thought it was about sound mitigation and potentially not light. I didn't know about the light requirement. But add that that we're concerned that opaque curtains may remain installed for unknown periods of time, not just for the event. And unlike HCF, we don't have the capacity to do enforcement of those staying up for long periods of time. Staff, conditions for approval, restudy of sound abatement approach is outlined in staff context and analysis. Staff recommendation is for deferral for restudy of the steel substructure for sound curtains. The one thing I will add that I didn't put in here, but spoke with the applicant later about is that staff is comfortable doing all of the other elements as a permit by staff review and just having the restudy of the sound abatement coming back before the board if the board were so inclined to go that way. So just in terms of, no, we don't normally separate things, but we are happy doing everything else as a permit with staff review and just having the sound abatement come back before
Okay,
the
so
board.
to just to make sure I understand, so
Yes.
all the other elements of the scope, they could actually do this with a separate application directly. to staff.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, applicant clarification or response?
Sure, thank you. Well, we are here for conceptual approval, knowing that everything's gonna sort of develop as we go along. So I think we will be looking to take into consideration those comments as well as the city architects and preservation groups as we develop the route. I can assure you, no one more than the owner would like to not have these sound panels. So I think this can really be a self-imposed enforcement. In order to rent his space, he has to, he's gonna want to show what is available in the Charleston views. The other piece of it is, as part of their operations, it's also a rental company, so they will rent to the events, the equipment. So there is staff to set this up and put it down. So within the operations, we think it is manageable. He also mentions these are expensive, so preserving them is important. Minimal exposure to weather. The events that we have around, wind events that we have around here will make you want to take them down. And then dedicated storage is another thing that we could offer on the rooftop as a way to mitigate that. At the windows, maybe the first floor, that might be it might be, I think it's probably really best to come back with wood at the first floor and then with the upper floors. If we could keep those in metal clad for less maintenance, that would be great. Go back with the insulated for sound also, again, Ben, they like those insulated windows. I think that is all that I did.
Phyllis, could you see terming this sound attenuation barrier as temporary?
We could, definitely the curtains would be temporary. I think that with the setup, it's gonna be far easier on, on operations if they don't have to, lift a hollow steel tube and put it in a sleeve and get all the parts, attached. But we're open to trying to work toward that solution. And
I was thinking if it's something that is temporary, not under our purview, we put it up and take it down. Is that correct?
Correct. That's why I said they could either
Yeah.
do temporary or permanent. It just depends on, the temporary would not have to come back before the board. Yeah.
Okay.
But if there's an element of it.
If there's a
that's
steel
permanent.
structure attached to the building, that is not temporary.
So
That's right.
Yeah.
Help me understand the flood mitigation barriers that are up around the city, like at MUSC and at the Hilton. Those are temporary.
Well, because the posts that those fit into go away, we have a code enforcement problem where people are leaving them up year round. So
Right.
know that in some ways, this is
That's not
informed by
allowed.
our experience
Right.
with those floodgate people. I mean, we're constantly sending people out
Well, that's.
to talk to property owners about that.
So that's just,
It's a big problem and nobody wants to take them down and they say they don't have enough bandwidth to do it. And we don't have enough bandwidth to stay on top of it.
back in the old days, people, they left plywood up for a while and I had to send letters.
So I'm sure you did.
Well, I'll start. So one thing, I cannot support clad simulated divided light windows on an 1814 building. I mean, that's just a basic preservation 101. You've got to go back with wood true divided. I mean, in my opinion, I just can't vote for that. Same for the composite shutters. Those need to be appropriate wood shutters like we have on all of our other historic buildings. I get that they're not there now, but I can't vote for synthetic materials on a historic building when we tell everybody else you've got to do that. So off the bat, that's a big issue with me. I understand some of the issues. I worry about anything that's called temporary because it ends up not being temporary. We can walk around and see a ton of stuff that's supposed to be temporary, and I'm not fussing about staff. It's just nature of being in the city. I would rather see, and I don't really have a good feel for, what these curtains look like. I mean, we don't have really even an elevation of what they look like installed. I have to assume they're gonna be there forever. And so even though I know they want a view, but the next person that buys this already has approval, and they might not care about the view, so we've got to think about it, not specific to your use, but to this building. So I would rather see at least a study, and this is a tough challenge for the architect, but if there's some kind of permanent means of shutters, maybe y'all talked about this, so if it's up there all the time and the shutters are closed or whatever, to me, it's some shutter system, that wouldn't bother me because then they're in Charleston Green and you have these shutters and then most of the time they all open and fold up. And then when the big party happens, that miraculously sound only goes one way, they close them on that. I would rather see a design that's, let's just assume it's permanent and it looks great rather than something that, again, I think the architect's doing the best they can, but they might be up there for a while. How are they gonna look when they're up there?
Yeah.
So those are my thoughts.
So I get it. We know that the shutters are gonna go up because if they're not up, they're gonna go to, the curtain, excuse me, the curtain. Then livability is gonna get called on them and they're gonna get the fine. Any other guest who's there is gonna wanna see the city of Charleston. I just don't see that as being as big a problem as we're making it out to be. But that's okay. That's it.
A quick question. The curtains are in sections. Approximately, like how heavy is one section, one panel of curtain?
That's a good question that we'll need to develop as we come along, but we think it looks like a 3-foot section, and what Tom, 2 inches. Yeah.
And it's approximately like 8 feet tall, something like that.
Yeah, mountable, it's 7'4".
Okay.
Which is 4 feet above the existing, wrought iron.
And there's several layers of like polyester fabric.
Yeah, all the down blankets, I'm gonna take
There's something to muffle the screams. Okay. Sorry. It's just what popped in mind. Any other?
It seems difficult to move forward with the lack of information to me. We're all asking questions. We have thoughts about it and we have different opinions and we have a suggestion for drawing something permanent. And then we have a suggestion for, how much is some way and I think we just need more information.
Yeah, and this is a very specialized application and I am completely unfamiliar with products of this type. And since it could have a dramatic architectural effect on the building, either, for some period of time. Yeah, I see that point.
Yeah, I mean, my concerns are just with those architectural curtains and believe it needs further study. I mean, I think the rest of everything looks great. Y'all done an amazing job of dealing with a building that needs a lot of maintenance, dealing with the ingress, egress, with the handicap ramp. And so, I mean, all that looks great. I think we need to figure out the curtains and if that is the only solution to get a better understanding for it and how it plays with the long-term use of the building.
I think a quick point of clarification.
Sure.
Since this is a prospective fire, I think we're all certainly willing to work towards a solution, but knowing that there is a path forward for something to be there that mitigate sound would be relatively critical.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make a motion. I'm gonna reverse some of what I just said. All right, so first of all, most of this stuff in your list, again, could have all been handled by staff, so I move for approval of all of the listed items that staff had, with the exception of the replacement of the windows and the composite shutters with non-compatible, non-historic, not in-kind materials. Conceptual approval for further, I don't know how to say this, because I think the idea could be possible if he figures out. I don't know, I'm pushing it, never mind.
Yeah.
That's gonna have enough to go by, yeah.
Yeah, I just think
Sorry,
if
kinda.
piecemealing like an approval's gonna be
I agree.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't know
that's-
what we're approving.
Well, and Mr. Metters is highly allergic to split motions. And there's a point to that. I understand that this is an aspect of your due diligence
Yeah, I
and time is
understand
of the essence, but I think it's a really significant building in a highly visible location and a very unusual product application. And I know it probably makes it is of little advantage to you to get any approval on the rest of the scope of the work if you don't know if you can actually get something past us that meets the condition of the agreement that you've signed. So, but I think that our charge is to protect the integrity of the building and the historic district. So, again, like noise, traffic, angry neighbors is not actually within our purview. So we just have to think about what does this product do to the building. So. Yeah.
Well, I'll make a motion for deferral.
Deferral? Do you want to make that with reference to board and staff comments?
With board and staff comments, sure.
Oh, I love that enthusiasm. Okay, so
Actually, no, I don't want to say, because I want to be clear on the windows. I'm sorry, that's just
okay.
Just don't do
So
that.
just deferral for restudy, because he's
Deferral for
heard, they've heard all
restudy.
the
He knows
comments.
what
Yeah.
the issues. Again, I just can't support that.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Mr. Bello for deferral for restudy. Period. Do we have a second? I'll second that. Just to get it. Okay. All right, I'll go down the roll,
We're
Mr. Bello.
putting you and Mr. Brown, because it was kind of simultaneous.
Oh.
just for the
No,
record.
Mr. Chairman.
Yay.
Just want to make sure I get the record correct.
I won. Okay, I'll go down the roll. Mr. Bello, how do you vote?
Yeah, in favor.
Okay, Mr. Brown.
Yay in favor.
Mr. Metters.
Yeah.
Mr. Watkins.
Yay in favor.
And I vote likewise. The motion carries 5-0. Okay.
Mr. Chair, staff would request a human needs break for 5 minutes. Not that I want to delay the final applicant, but.
Yeah, okay, we'll take a break for
Like that
5 minutes.
I got a lot of needs. Let me tell you.
Just.
Yeah, okay, great.
If it passes anyway.
That's what I'm saying. Well, you could say, I just can't support this. All right.
They're fine. You would know what I would be irritated about.
All right.
I think we could go hot there.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, me too. I like your enthusiasm for that. That's everything.
No. I had to help him out.
You know what? I need some sugar so badly. I'm just gonna toss my mind.
There you go.
Yes, desperation.
Yeah.
I don't know. But that's.
Yeah.
So after I saw you at the meeting,
Oh, yeah.
I'm not kidding you, I hold my car. Serious. You came in, I was like, damn, last time I saw him was right before that happened
That's crazy.
on volley.
Somebody just ran into you?
Yeah, I'm actually shocked. You might have even seen it.
We were on our bikes, like, where were you? Like on the island or?
We were still on James, we're on Wally Road.
Oh, and you know what? I bet, because we afterwards we went straight to Bowen's Island. I bet that y'all probably already.
We were already on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Butler.
and someone then got in a wreck by looking at us. So they were going the opposite way.
What's that called? Turkey necking or something like that?
I don't know.
Rubberneck.
Rubbernecking.
Rubberneck.
Somebody was looking at you and got
This
rear-ended.
pulled up this car.
Oh, you did?
Maybe like 2 minutes after I ran
Yeah,
into it on the beach.
I was at the beach.
Oh, really? Oh, like over the weekend?
This was.
Like a month ago.
Yeah, like a month ago. But that's the last time I saw it. Seaton. It's just like it triggered that memory.
Do you have any card?
No.
Okay, well, I get into a wreck after seeing me.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
No, I was like, I'm glad I went. And not be something I did. It went right off there. So I can walk.
Oh, yeah.
In Harris here. And so I was like,
Yeah, that's really.
I can hold
Yeah,
off.
and Harris here, that's the critical.
Yeah. I was like, I can hold off on the car for a minute.
Sorry that happened.
We were hit that. And his car was fine.
Oh, yeah, no, that's must have a span or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Well, I had a CRV and it just went. We were both good.
And check those consumer reports, make sure you got a safe one.
I'm like reliability and safety.
Yeah.
The two things.
Gotta go with the Subaru.
I asked on my Insta. I was like, what's the car that I feel a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I have, and they have a top safety rating, so.
Our kind of looks similar along.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a four-door, I mean, it's good.
Iron fence.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
Either way. Yeah, either way. No.
Sure, I mean, I don't have personal relationships with people over there, so. No, I do at the Clemson Design Center,
Whichever place you think of.
but I thought you meant the building arts. So that-
I did. Well,
it sounds like what you're talking about would be more
Yeah, it's
building
very
arts.
close to building arts.
it's a mix. Some of the stuff is,
You wanna do
some is
that?
architecture, some of it is real estate down. I'd like to get it to one where.
You probably be better off with just cold calling building arts because Clemson institutionally isn't just gonna.
Yeah, they're just not gonna,
Like their library system. is gonna be-
yeah, and people have tried to get them books before and that become a problem.
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
it has to go through the headquarters of the main campus and then they'll reject stuff, whereas the building arts.
Okay, all right. Let's get the show on the road here. All right, one last application and a reminder to those of you who might have joined us during the proceedings, that because we're down to one meeting a month, we're really trying to stick to the allotted time limits for each phase of each. So, 141 meeting slash 174 King in 10 minutes or less.
This is a larger site that includes both a category 1 and category 3 buildings that date from the 1870s. And it's in the Olden Historic District, and they are requesting a conceptual review of a new park plan, modifications to 174 King Street, and addition and modifications to 141 Meeting Street Building and Building Link. Just to remind everybody of the site, here it is. It's fairly large, so I know that the applicants will be presenting in 3 parts, all of those parts that are project. So ready for applicant presentation.
Hello, I'm Ted Rich with BMOC Hospitality Collection, and we're excited to be back to present this project for conceptual approval. As BD mentioned, it's going to be presented in 3 portions. So the 174 King, the event lawn and community park, and then the 141 meeting building. And we are asking for conceptual approval for all 3 components of the project, with associating at minimum, if conceptual approval is granted, the
potentially final details to staff for at least the park portion of the project, so that can move forward with TRC and stormwater and everything else. So I'll turn it over to David Burt to begin the 174 King building.
Racing to the podium, hit 10 minutes. Okay, so as he said, we're gonna break it down into 3 parts, but I also wanted to point out that, you know, last time, and specifically on 174 King, we were asked to simplify. And we were asked by Historic Charleston Preservation and by you, and I think we achieved that. We were also asked to work a little closer with the landscape architectural team so that it didn't look like a building that wasn't working with the park. And I think we've achieved both on 141 and 174. So this is just 174, you know, the building. I don't need to revisit all of that. Before and after, basically the footprint didn't really change very much, with the exception of making sure that we minimized where we were, and I'll show it in the elevations, where we did not cut as many holes in the building. And we're basically trying to use those openings that are already existing. So I'm going to jump to that. This front rendering shows from King Street. We did open up, the request was to make those bottom openings windows, go back to what they were. They're louvers now. So we would take the louvers out, put in windows. Those are into the bathrooms. So we would have like a shade on the inside, but they would be windows. And they have window boxes in front of them too. The other thing that's changed a little bit here, you'll see it when David Kelly presents the park, but the railing and the fencing has changed slightly to work better with the building. This was the before view. I think a lot better. No, the trees filled in a little bit. But some of the major things that we did here, we worked a lot more on the opening to the cafe, the transaction window. So it's not, I don't know who said it, but it's not McDonald's.
That was me.
Okay.
Mr. Bello.
Sorry about that. We got rid of the, I'll go back, show it back and forth. We got rid of the balcony. You'll see the balcony that was above the transaction window is gone. And now that's just a window. And then we just put awnings over all of those openings. The opening on the far right is the entrance to the cafe. The opening on the far left is the entrance to the restrooms. And we integrated the park a lot better to the design. This was the before other side of this building. This is the after. Now here, the trees got lightened up. Again, not really relevant to what we're talking about here, but we did. And then we had 3 doors opening onto the park. We were asked to keep them in the context of what they are today. So now it's window, door, window, which is exactly what it is today. Up top, it was 3 windows. We were asked to, you know, we need to have access to the balcony, and we got rid of 1 of the 3. We kept 1 of the openings as a window in the middle and just kept the 2 on the side. I think it balances the elevation to have the 2 and the 1. This is a view looking from the park proper. Same information. You've seen this. This is the before and after. So you can see we reduced the number of openings. So in fact, I'll go back 1. That is the existing elevation. The top is what we were proposing last time. The bottom matches the existing elevation for the most part, with the exception of the door that we have to open to get access to the stair that we're now moving from outside the building to inside the building. There's that elevation before and after. That elevation before and after. I remember too, when I said that, we weren't showing the context of the fencing, and that was one of the requests, was to make sure we showed from property line to property line in the elevation. So that's it for 174 King. I'll turn it over to David Kelly to transition to the landscape.
Hi, I'm David Kelly from Reese Robinson Partners. I'm the main designer for the park. I will make this short and sweet because I know it's getting late in the night. And I know you've seen the park. I know you've been introduced to the park. I know you've seen the precedents. I know you've seen what we're attempting to do, the move, the feeling.
et cetera, et cetera. The major changes that we made, which we took from you, were the two areas where the crepe myrtles are encroaching on the foundations of the 174 King building and the 141 Meeting building. So we basically, in the case of the 174 building, we actually built the trees up in the short planter to get them away from the critical foundation moment, and so that they're safely off that. And we actually have trees that are growing currently that are actually have flat backs. So we'll keep those trees away from the back of the building and obviously trim them to keep them for that matter. For the ones at the 141 Meeting building, we've actually physically moved them over because we've had the space. So they're actually close to 10 feet off the 141 Meeting building, and they will also be the trees that have the flat backs, and they will be kept trimmed. So essentially, we've moved the root balls off of both of the areas where they're critical to the foundation areas. The rest of the park in terms of design, with the exception of a few additions of some plantings in the sort of area where the cafe may possibly be. We've added a little bit of planting here, but other than that, the park, the design stays the same from what you saw from the last presentation. So we've moved the root balls to keep the foundation safe and secure. Thank you very much for your time.
Joe Schmidt, Evans Schmidt Architects. Just keep going.
You'll just have to go past our precedent still here, but you can have some pretty landscape images.
Go ahead, Zen.
Tell me when yours is done, because I don't.
When you stop seeing green.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
And you should be soon.
You're there.
That's it.
Okay. For us, it was, we had a much bulkier connector. We had to have it. We needed it for mechanical issues, which we've done a restudy, figured out how to accomplish it within the back of the building and within a much more condensed connector between the two. These items. And I apologize for you, Trey. You're the one that everybody keeps acting like you know all this. So just.
I was actually here for y'all's last presentation,
okay.
so
Okay.
not on the board, I was in the audience.
Probably next to you, Joe.
Perfect, okay. I'm glad.
Didn't even
realize you're a
Yeah.
really quick study. This was our before. You see the bulk on the side, on the Gibbs side of it, and the way it was coming across. It was an ABA arch design that we were copying from the Porter's Lodge out to Charleston. And it totally undid Eddie Bello because it wasn't centered on the driveway. And it wasn't possible at that time because of trying to fit all three elements in there. We realized after we talked to the BMOC people, they weren't really interested in a pedestrian entrance, so that we could get rid of the ABA and just go with B, if we will, which allowed us to shift and perfectly align the arch with the thing. We also got rid of, like I said, the bulk of the bulky portion of this link up against the Gibbs was no longer necessary. So this became a very symmetrical, that's why we shaded it in, became a very symmetrical link on itself. It's got its own identity. We have very slavishly went back and are going to detail the arch on the ground floor exactly the way E.B. White did Porter's Lodge arch. Okay, I've never plagiarized anything in my life, but we're plagiarizing this because E.B. White was the architect for this building. So the same hand would have done that, and it's rather unusual the way he did it. Second floor existing. I'm sorry. You don't need a second floor, but you see here you have the bulk again and a hip roof, a gable roof, and we have gone in with a flat roof, which is recommended. Greatly simplified that roof length. The mechanical is being hidden back in behind what we still have as a hip, which is appropriate for the portion behind the actual 141. That will be done in copper. The existing up top and existing the way it is now and then the proposed. So the one thing that we don't show in these renderings, the elm trees we are not going to eradicate the property line between the two buildings. It'll always be. We don't own the driveway. So the elm trees will be maintained forever and replaced as they go, that run down the line, property line, which is just to the left of that arch. The hedgerow will remain, and you will only ever view these as two separate properties when you walk down the sidewalk. So you will appreciate looking down the walkway, but you won't see that blank wall, if you will, on the Gibbs side. You will walk down till you get to the driveway and you will see that tripod window. That, I don't know if I have the
rendering shows it.
Oh, pardon?
The rendering shows it.
Okay. I don't know that I had the before on that. No, I guess it'll come back around, so let's do that. This was the north side. There were two windows there before. We want to bring them back. They were removed when they put vaults in place. So this is what we proposed before, previous and current for what you saw. The back wall, the demolition has taken place since we were last here. So now you're looking at the real back wall, which hasn't been seen since 1910 or so of the building. Previously, you see the ABA and a lot going on. And now you can see how much more simplified it is with the arch below, a square opening to the Gibbs walkway, and a tripart window without an arch on it above the arch on the 141 side. We're using 1/1 windows, which brings Gibbs into context. That's what Gibbs are. So that's kind of our happy meeting point, if you will. The tripart is also a concept that it's on part of the Gibbs. So again, we're differentiating the window because we've left 141, then we're headed toward Gibbs, or vice versa, however you want to do that. That was previous on the back. That's greatly simplified from the back. The existing building now, there's a missing window, as you can see, right next to the chimney breast coming down. Before we didn't put that window back, we are choosing to put that window back. It was there. It's a plug that was put in 1960s. Existing from the front, you can see the previous and current and previous and current. Again, totally aligned. And do remember, now that we have not dealt with the transformers, we discussed it before, we were saying there's some kind of screen. I'm not sure there's going to need to be a screen or want to be a screen because that hedgerow is going to totally engulf those, but we can deal with it. You'll only ever need it for the one side. I don't know, we don't talk landscape, but this is landscape that Gibbs is going to maintain. They don't want to see them either. Both transformers, when they're moved there, are going to be facing the driveway. So again, that's the one side that might want some kind of screen. Again, if we put our trees in there, you wouldn't even be seeing what you're seeing now. It's kind of impossible to see that view. That was before. That's it.
Okay, great. Well, 16.5 minutes ain't bad.
Did we really do that quick? You know?
I mean, they were plowing ahead and. Okay, any questions to the applicant by the board? Okay, any public comment regarding?
I'm sorry.
Oh, yes.
The removal of the windows on 174, I'm sorry, on the EB White building, the removal of the windows on the second floor. What was the thought behind that?
Are you on the addition?
On the addition.
The fact that the garden, the way they have an ABA garden, they've got a more intimate fountain garden. And we've got a museum. We want to be putting art up there. So we didn't have windows, we had fake grills. We got rid of the fake grills up there. Because they can't live in, and they didn't want windows. And then they also are bringing in full grown trees. They'll already be 30 feet tall and a hedgerows. So we looked at it, we said, all right, well, how else can we pattern this back wall, make it look like just cutouts that look like windows? Every time you do that, it looks like they were windows, just like the ones that are floating up on the building now. So we sort of have taken this as it's a blank slate as a backdrop for the park. We have no contact with the park directly. We don't need fake contact, fake grills. They don't need it. So our thought was just be clean, and we talked about it, and everybody shared that same opinion.
And my other question is a clarification. You removed the pitch on the roof of the connecting pipeline because of board recommendation.
To follow up on Seaton's question, Joe, so I'm looking at the from the garden, I'll turn it around, west. And I know that you've got restrooms, right? And then you've got administrative offices.
Totally across the ground floor, elevator equipment and stuff, and museum on the upper floor.
So the upper floor is listed as reception, that's why.
Yeah, that's what and just to follow on that, so that's the reception area, and then the connection walking over. Are they gonna hang art in that, so you need the wall space in there? Okay.
And reception it's not, I mean, not just moving in, it means they have to have a desk there.
But there would be art in that area,
It's
is what
all
you're saying, they need the wall, okay.
The whole point from their point of view is you will move through this and not even know you left the gates. That's the way museums need people to move, or they won't move, they won't go through the process, so. Yes, that's why it's wider, it's not just a walkway, it's wide enough.
Yeah. That helps, thank you, I was curious about that.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, any public comment regarding this application?
Anna Catherine Alexander with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We thank the project team for reaching out to us on this proposal, and we continue to support enhancing the public realm with the ribbon park between these vital historic corridors. At this phase of review, we would like to focus our comments on the proposed connecting addition between the Gibbs Museum and 141 Meeting Street. We appreciate revisions since the previous review that reflect a simplified approach to massing and a quieter, more symmetrical design. However, we continue to struggle with the amount of blank wall space on the additions, which has unfortunately increased since the previous review, with the removal of a window adjacent to the Gibbs facing Meeting Street, and then all of the faux openings on the garden side. We're excited to welcome a new highly visible civic space in this landscape, and we urge the applicant to focus on how the adjacent buildings can connect to the park experience rather than be dictated by the desired interior program. We ask that true fenestration be incorporated wherever possible, and at the very least that creative design techniques be employed to offer visual interest where blank wall space is absolutely necessary. Thank you.
No further public comments, so board staff comments and recommendations.
Sure. Once this project receives conceptual approval as a whole, the future individual pieces should come back as separate applications for the next stages of the project. The comment regarding the American Gardens Park, applicant has met previous board and staff comments by listening to concerns about the impact of the crepe myrtles alongside the EB White building by moving them farther back away from the historic structure. And I should have added King Street here too. It's just an omission. All other aspects of the site plan remain unchanged and were previously supported by board and staff. For 174 King Street, applicant has met previous board and staff comments through the restudy of the facades to minimize impact to the historic fabric and historic character of the building. Staff supports the new composition of all elevations and their associated demolition. For 141 Meeting Street, board and staff previously supported height scaling mass and architectural direction of the north and south elevations. Applicant has met previous board and staff conditions by simplifying the architectural expression of the proposed west and east elevations. Specifically, staff support the simplification of the roof form above the bridge connection, the alignment of the Meeting Street elevation arch with the access passage into the garden and keeping that arch as a singular such expression on the bridge connection. Just as a side note, the larger site plans and then the building specific plans, the gates swing in different directions. So we just want to make sure moving forward that they are in agreement with each other. Staff also support the simplified expression of the tripartite window atop the arch. Also changing the open pedestrian passage close to the Gibbs Museum from arcuated form to abbreviated expression. The garden elevation shows substantial areas of blank facade on the new addition. In general, the BAR does not support such a large area of blankness when not necessary. In this case, both the program of bathrooms and mechanicals, and I should have added galleries, as well as the large area of crepe myrtles being planted in front of this area mitigate BAR policies. Staff conditions for approval. The first one is the same one that you all saw before, which is your building against historic fabric. We want to make sure there's a plan in place to mitigate and prevent damage to both historic buildings, but particularly the category 1. For the second one, it regards, Joe, what you already mentioned a little bit about the transformers. We need to see detailed drawings showing materials and architectural expression of screening, because last time that's what was mentioned. If it's going to be landscape, we still need to understand that in more detail, in addition to the details you would normally produce. Staff recommendation, don't have a hard head act, Mr. Metters. It looks split, but it's not. For all three, it is conceptual approval with board and staff conditions, but staff is additionally recommending a final review by staff for the site plan for the garden park, but also final review by staff for 174 King Street, given sort of the minimal intervention happening there.
Great, thank you. Applicant response with clarification. You don't have to. Okay. Board discussion.
I'm sensitive to Satan's comments about the blank wall, especially on the Meeting Street side. Much less impacting to me on the west side, just because of the vastness of space between Facultad and King Street. But so I really don't have confidence in either position yet, but it's a good point.
Well, I'll start or I'll keep on. And like I said last time, I don't want to overload. This is a fantastic project. This park is going to be amazing. It's great to see these buildings renovated. So just don't want to overlook that as I jump into a comment. So thank you again. I'm really excited about the whole thing. Thank you also for the changes to the King Street building. I have no comments on that. Very good. Thank you. The park's awesome. I do struggle a little bit. You've got a museum. We need wall space. I do think the changes are, I don't know, Seton, you might disagree, but I think the changes are for what the board asked for, simplified, and really compete with 141. I do think that it bothers me having so much blank space, and I'm not saying you have to have windows, but and I don't want to see fake shutters. So that's just, with faux stuff. I don't, but there are other architectural tricks that you can do to give that facade some variety, or either one. I'm less concerned, I guess, because technically our visibility from the public right of way on the west is not going to be great. You're gonna have to look way through. So, but you can't see anything with those huge trees. So to me, and I agree with all the staff comments, to me, if the further study of that Meeting Street elevation, give it a little more interest, and that's a challenge for the architect. So it just doesn't look quite so austere.
I would agree with Mr. Bello on 174. It's an incredible upgrade from, and the landscaping and hardscaping around it is really, really nicely done. And based on my questions about the EV White building, and I think, from my colleagues too, it's not a concern necessarily, but I think further study of it would be well worth it just for the Meeting Street experience.
I agree with that.
I don't have any other further comments other than what's been said by staff and board thus far, but it's a great project. It's gonna be awesome.
Okay, anybody want to take a crack at a motion?
Gonna be a split motion.
But things will be continuing as separate.
They will be continuing separate, so if the first part of it is all the same, this part that comes next, since they come back separately.
They have to permit them separately,
Yeah.
they're separate addresses.
Yeah.
All right, so I will make a motion for conceptual approval for all three. For the King Street building in the park, final details to staff. For the 141 building, board comments and staff comments. That's short enough. I think we're fairly on the same train of thought, aren't we?
Did you say board and staff comments?
Yeah, I did.
Board and staff comments for Meeting Street.
And what'd you say for the park?
Conceptual approval with final details to staff.
Okay, so the way that this spilled out of my pen is that conceptual approval with final review by staff for American Gardens Park and 174 King Street. Conceptual approval with board and staff comments for 141 Meeting Street.
Yeah.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, so let's go down the roll. Mr. Fellow, how do you vote?
In favor.
Mr. Brown?
Yay in favor.
Matters?
Yay.
Mr. Watkins?
Yay in favor.
And I vote likewise, the motion carries 5-0.
And clarification after you approve motion.
I mean, that usually works great, but go ahead.
Is, well, I'm asking for y'all's clarification of what I think. Is there a consensus that we're really only focusing on the Meeting Street side?
Correct,
I think that's right.
correct.
I agree.
That's what we all kind of arrived at.
Which just revisions to the connector of that elevator.
And I don't think you have to go crazy.
Pardon?
I don't think you have to go crazy with it. Simple's good, but plain is not.
I know it's not in your purview, but I think we'll be coming in with some penetration and we'll get sheet rock. Which is,
Thanks, staff.
it's okay, you know, which is okay, because it's in place and someday down the road, it gets opened up.
I wish you hadn't told me that.
We all know it's done around town.
All right.
Anybody want to chocolate, please?
Form follows home. Thank you all.
I was thinking you'd do like a blind.